I'm actually glad that you started with a seat at the table because I feel like a lot of black politics is oriented around that concept. It's oriented around getting a seat at that table, but we have to realize that that's not the same as liberation. It's not approximate to liberation. It's not a step towards liberation, and that's relevant to some of the stories we're going to be talking about today. And I actually want to start not with an openly political topic, but with what's been going on with the NFL and Jay-Z. That's something that that's something that a lot of black folks have been talking about. But I think it is useful as a springboard for conversations that we frequently have. So we're just going to have real talk at the table. Now, someone said on the internet, and this is very true. I think that a problem that we have in our communities is that a lot of black people have defined black power as counting other people's money, and what I mean by that is that we take black success stories, those black entrepreneurs, those black business owners, those black millionaires, and we're sitting here broke. We're sitting here in dilapidated. We're
gonna stop saying we broke. No. You are broke. I'm not broke. I don't have what I should have, but I'm not broke. You broke. Stop speaking broke. Stop speaking broke on black folks. Come on now.
Poverty is a comparative thing, and the richest. Well,
you're in poverty.
Martin Luther King. He's the one that said that we live in a vast ocean of material prosperity, and we're not getting any material prosperity. That's an economic reality. That's a redistributional reality. That's a redistributional reality. That's a reality that's imposed on us both by our state and by the history of black people in this country. So when I'm saying we're broke, I'm not disparaging black people. I don't think that we need to pathologize poverty either. There's nothing wrong with being broke. People are broke or people are poor because rich people steal from them.
Everybody's not poor and broke. Antoine, you're talking about. Listen, black people are not. We're not where we should be. We don't have what we should. That don't mean that we're broke.
Now, the average wealth that a black woman has is $5, Herschel.
Okay.
$5.
Maybe that's the black women you know.
Again, that's how wealth works. So of course, there are going to be exceptions to the rule. Of course, in order to make millionaires, there are going to be people who get stolen from. That's why I'm saying that we have to look at this in redistributional terms. Right now, 3 billionaires control more money than the bottom 80% of Americans.
Right.
3 billionaires.
Right.
Compared to them, we are broke. Compared to the amount of money that this country has and takes in, we're broke and poor.
So you're going to live, but you can't live your life under the guise of what somebody else has. Again, you have to put an asterisk next to nothing. Come on, with y'all out there. Come on, chime in. Chime in.
No, what I was saying is that I think a lot of people have defined black power by counting other people's money, and we look at success stories. No. We look at success stories, and we project our fantasies of what we could be or what we can be on those success stories. We look at a black president, and we say, "Oh, we can be president now. Racism is over. Racism doesn't have an impact in our lives. We can actually supplement that if we get educated like he did, if we make the right moves like this business person did." And that's not really how racism works. It's not how class works in America. That's not how financial attainment works or success works in an American context. And it's particularly not how it works if you're black. So right now we have the spectacle of someone like Jay-Z, who has fashioned himself, he's positioned himself interestingly. There is not a single social movement that Jay-Z has openly supported. There is not a single political movement that he has supported. He has always been about making money for himself, and that's fine. And no, it's not fine, but it's something that's within the realm that we can deal with. We understand that. But he is somebody who is benefiting from the image of someone who is showing, he's a black billionaire. We've made it now because he's made it. And that's not how finances work. When Jay-Z gets his paycheck, that paycheck hasn't gone to the community. That's gone to his bank account.
Okay. Now I'll let you ramble on.
Yeah, I didn't ramble.
You did. I'll let you go. Make up your mind. I just said something when we started the show. We have to define who we are and what we are. Now, you can't define your prosperity and measure on a white person's yardstick. You're comparing your wealth to theirs. Now, in comparison, yes, it's very disparaging, but that don't mean I'm broke. That don't mean I'm poor. That don't mean I'm destitute. Maybe that's your life. Wait a minute. Maybe that's your life. You're not going to put me in that pot just because I don't have what somebody else has. You understand what I'm saying? The same way The same way Jay-Z doesn't define me either. Just because he made it don't mean that I made it. I have to decide for me or my community what prosperity is. You're defining your prosperity based on white people. We are, wait a minute, we are so far behind as citizens of this country because of racism, because of the system. The system is not broke, it was never set up for us. Now, with that being said, I can't continue to say if I don't have what they have, that I'm broke, because I'm not broke. I'm not where I should be. I don't have what I should have, but I am not broke. Stop speaking that over black people, because then what happens is you make excuses for why you don't participate, why you won't work, because the white man gonna take it, so you don't do nothing. So you pull on your own community. The white man ain't gonna let you this, the white man ain't gonna let you that. Again, you can't keep comparing yourself to someone else. Now you have to decide what prosperity is to you. Some people are materialistic, some people aren't. I don't care what Jay-Z does. I don't buy his product. So him having $1 billion or whatever, it doesn't change my life one way or the other. Now here's my problem. When you want to come and take from my community and you don't put anything back in, like you said. If you've made it and you want to claim your community and your culture, you have to do something to help move it forward.
Yeah, my problem with that is this, Herschel, and I think that we need to we can't view broke, we can't view poverty, and we can't view wealth, and we can't view success in individual terms. We have to. No, I'm not saying that you're doing so, but I'm saying that as a general rule, if we want to analyze what our economic condition is, we can't do that by individual rubric. You know, you yourself may have $1 million in your bank account. That doesn't necessarily say anything about the general attainment or the general.
Wait a minute. Wait. No, well, let's put it right there, because I'm going to address that right there. What you said. Now you said the same. No.
I'm making a broader point.
But the same. But you said that people run in groups with the same type of wealth, the same type of mentality, right?
No, that's not what I said here. Let me make my argument. Just wait. Let me make my argument. You can have $1 million in your own individual bank account. That has no bearing for the level of material wealth held by your collective. And we're black here. The collective has to matter more than what our individual attainment or individual level of prosperity may be. So, you know, we need to look at wealth in multiple terms. We need to look at it in generational terms. We need to look at it in collective terms. But we also need to note how wealth is what creates a degree of flexibility. Wealth is why we weren't able to stay in the South, where we could actually own states, or where we could actually own land, where we can have states that have progressive politics. Wealth is what stopped us from being able to have land, so that politicians would actually come to us and come to us for the vote, like they go to rural people. The federal government, from the Department of Agriculture on down, was able to specifically take land from black people because we did not have the same level of concentrated wealth that white people have. Wealth in this context, it's not a measure of how hard you work. It's a matter of how the government is working to actually keep your wealth stable. So what that means in the American context is that because the government has made white wealth stable, it's also made white people more flexible. It's made their politics more flexible. It's expanded the scope of where their politics can reach. So when I'm saying we're broken, when I'm using comparative terms, what I'm saying is what I'm doing is I'm documenting what that means in terms of political power we have. Right now, what that means is that it means that those white people who are getting those nice homes in Florida, which is a major swing state that people like Trump can win, I'm saying that has a necessary impact on what our political future will be. And I think that we need to look at those things in conversation and at the same time. Again, you individually may not be broke, you individually may not be broke, but as a collective, you're a part of a collective where the average level of wealth, thanks to the Great Recession, thanks to Jim Crow, thanks to slavery, thanks to the intergenerational effects of slavery, they have about $2,000 of wealth compared to $150,000, which average white person has, average white family has. So, we're looking at a disparity where white people have 10 to 12 times more wealth than black people do, because they're not targeted by state programs or group programs that keep black people's economic position precarious. And we have to talk about those things at the same time, Marshall.
Okay, I hear you, and I'm harkening back to a conversation we had.
Yeah.
That you made the argument that the average immigrant, when they come here, they got $2,000, so they're starting off okay.
I don't know if it was that number. I don't know if
you said at least $2,000. We had it. We can go back through the tapes.
Yeah.
I remember it because there's something. Yeah. But here's my point. with what you're saying, you are the only person in my orbit, in my community, that's broke.
Again.
So I'm not individual. I'm not individual in my network. In the network. In the network. I'm citing
research from.
I hear you.
Again,
you cannot speak brokenness. Listen, no. You are speaking broke.
Money is material.
Okay, so what do you do to change your situation?
Again, you can't put it on you because it's not individual.
You know what I do to help my situation? I teach him how to fish. I teach him no. Say what?
We both agreed that it was collective. We're talking
about it is collective. So again, those that know teach, those that don't learn, and we work together to raise our community. So again, you're speaking something. You can tell me about all the articles you want, and I can take you to a community.
Read that articles research.
And my research is what? So I can go to my phone and my circle of 100 or 1,000 and friends of them. If I show you that they're not broke, you're gonna tell me that research is not.
Okay, that's a cutout. We're talking statistics. Like there are exceptions to every rule, but that doesn't necessarily determine the general composition of that rule. When we're talking about I would actually implore you. There's an economist. This is a black economist. One of his specialties is actually reparations, but he's an economist by trade, and he actually documents the degree of the racial wealth gap. His name is William Darity, and you can look him up. I think
that's not the argument. My argument is not the gap. My argument is you can't say that. The gap is important because the gap is what's wait a minute. Power that we have. You can't say that I'm dead because somebody is living on a hill, and you're saying that we're broke. Comparatively, yes, but we're not broke. We're not broke. Antoine, we are in a zero-sum political context where the people with more political power and more money get to determine the future, determine the environment. Antoine, we were born here. We were kidnapped. We were born here.
I agree.
You can't fight the same fight that you could fight if we were Haiti, if we were Jamaica, if we were removed.
I don't disagree with
geography dictates.
But we have to talk about economics in comparative terms because comparative terms are what's keeping that power disparity over here. White people are up here precisely because of that comparative. That disparity is not only a function of white government and white political practice, it's also a function of them actually taking a gap and widening it further with every generation, Herschel. If we're not thinking collective, our opponents are thinking collective, Herschel.
Well, thinking collective is working with your community. Because again, I can't see this. Wait, Antoine, wait. This is when I say you have double talk. This is what I'm talking about. Wait a minute. There's an end game, of course, but I cannot change the world. I can change my orbit. If the orbit goes out, we can set up a diagram. It can be used in other places. You're discounting the fact that people start off and there are pockets of things going on. There's wealth being built in some places. We always talk about the Jackson Project in Mississippi. Now, if it gets replicated, it can be duplicated, and we can start to build things. People are starting to build things, and you're discounting the fact that steps are being taken. You're just saying, right now it's this. Yeah, right now it is this. But that don't mean that we are all broke. That don't mean that we're not striving as community to change that.
I never said that we aren't striving as communities to change that. I actually said outright that when you say
I'm not individual.
When you say black people are poor, when you say that they're broke, you're not saying that they don't work or that they aren't trying to work or they aren't trying to better their condition. What you're saying is that there's a process, a redistributional process, whereby the government and whereby white actors and whereby historical factors actually contribute to the theft of black material well-being, black economics, and that leaves us in a more empowered position. You mentioned the Cooperation Jackson Project in Mississippi, but you can't talk about that in isolation from what happened in the Mississippi Delta. The Atlantic's Van Newkirk, he wrote an excellent article documenting the incredibly comprehensive steps that white landowners, that a white government did to actually take nearly almost all that land from black people. We went from being, I could be butchering this, but it's something ridiculous because we went from having 70% of us having land to only 6% of us having land, precisely because of the Department of Agriculture policy. Now the only way to assess that is through comparative economic terms. You have to compare, because what happens when wealth is stolen from us is that other people are getting that wealth. That wealth doesn't disappear. That wealth ends up getting concentrated elsewhere. Now, what's the effect of that? The effect of that is that Black people, because they couldn't make money, because they couldn't keep land, because white terrorism kept them out of the land that they wanted to own, they had to move up north. Well, guess what that meant? That meant that in one of the blackest states that we had, a state that should be blue, a state that should be Black controlled, is now white controlled, precisely because of dynamics that related entirely to comparative racial attainment and economic attainment, and not even just through land ownership, but also through sharecropping and the kind of economic arrangements we're in. So we have, when we talk about economics, I know people don't, I know it's not a flattering narrative to hear, and part of why it's not flattering is because we blame, Americans have a tendency of blaming poor people for being poor, right, instead of the rich people who are taking their wealth from them. And that's part of why we pathologize poverty. But, I think that we have to talk about economics in comparative terms, because that's the only way we can get a clear picture of where we are and why we're there.
Antoine, we just left. I don't want to leave you out. You can jump on in. I know we'll get into it. This is what we do. Just jump in.
Even if it's just to ask questions.
Right. Antoine, I hear you, but I just, like I said, we know. See, the problem is we know what the problem is. We know we're in a game that was rigged from the beginning. We're in a place that we can't take over because this is foreign land to us as well. So our power base is not here because there's not enough of us. But what I'm telling you is, just like the thing in Jackson, like I mentioned, if you show that it can be done one place, it can be replicated. It took a long time. It took a lot of steps. And this is all I'm saying. When you say what you say, I'm telling the other side, because the only picture that you're painting is a bleak one. Only picture that you're painting is a bleak picture. And that's why I always ask you, fix it, Antoine. Since it's so bleak, what the hell are you doing here? If you're not going to have a soul, because anybody can tell you that a house burned down. Can you rebuild it? Or do you know anything that will help to rebuild it? It's very easy to talk about what the problems are. Anybody can do that. Any idiot with a mic and a camera can talk about the problem. But we're here for solutions. So my thing is this. First of all, stop speaking brokenness. In comparison, I understand what you're saying. But there are people and there are communities that are striving to change it. And they can only change it sometimes one block at a time and go outward. That's how it starts. You build a house one brick at a time. I keep saying this to you. You keep looking. I understand the end. I understand the big picture. And I understand where we're at. But you have to understand, it didn't come overnight. We've been in this place just about, this year makes 400 years, right? 400 years. We came here unwillingly. We were kidnapped. We were forced to forget where we came from, forget our God, forget our culture, forget our bonds to one another. Now, first thing we have to do is get our bonds back to one another, because we were taught to not trust each other and not to work with one another. These are things that have to be done first. First. When you speak positivity into people and gain their trust, it's the same thing. White people will fight amongst themselves, but they'll galvanize against us. Other groups will galvanize themselves against us. They'll put aside you look at these races, sometimes some of these white supremacists and things like that, they're fine until they think one of us is getting something. Then all of a sudden it's lockstep and they don't want to talk to you anymore. So again, there's a process going on. We have to reunite. We have to re-identify ourselves as one people. I don't care whether you're albino or you're midnight blue. Your ass is black. And we got to understand that. Whether we like it or not, that's the reality. We have to first get over the distrust between one another. We have to get over the jealousy of one another. These are things that are taught to keep us separate. Our unity is our strength. The reason why they spend so much money and locking black men up, because that's our power base. Our unity is our power base. That's the first step. So we're here to unify. Yeah, the situation is jacked the hell up. It is. It's jacked all the way up. But we have to take the steps to first reunify. Once we can trust one another and start uniting and pooling our money and stop trying to be better than the Joneses or keep up with the Joneses, pulling everybody up together, like you said, collectivizing. But that's a process. We got to undo 400 years of mental abuse, 400 years of physical oppression. It's still going on. How can we even unite when we still getting shot in the streets, Antoine? Some damn whales beached, and they went crazy. They went crazy. They saved the whales, which is great. Boy got shot in the street. I don't see nobody protesting but us. We're all these great Christians, all these great white folks, all these compassionate people. Where's the compassion for them? The little girl got her father taken away by immigration. My daddy didn't do nothing. He was working for a living. Where's all the compassion? Michael Vick went to jail and lost $100 million for fighting dogs, which he wasn't even in. But if he shot a black man in the street, he wouldn't have got nothing. Come on now. You understand what I'm saying? We have to, just like you said, the pathology is something that was taught. It's something that's a learned behavior. To not trust one another, to work against one another. And this is why every time any of us talk about uniting or black power, this is why they get scared. As long as we talk about sports and entertainment or how much money I got in popping bottles, nobody cares about that. You know, this is why they use those type of people to try and placate black people. And just like you said, we got to be smart enough to realize that it's just that. So what, you got $1 billion. Where you from? Is Brooklyn ain't no better. You always repping Brooklyn. You put anything back into Brooklyn? Nah. You build any schools in Brooklyn? Did you build the institute? Again, this is why I give LeBron James credit for what he does. That's a grown man. He helps the community where he's from. Now, he can't fix everything, but he's doing what he can. He's doing what he can, you know, to the length of what he can do. Now, there are people with means that, like you said, it's his money. You do what he wants with it. Don't look for me to support you because you don't do anything for your community. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I think and I'm glad that you went back to the topic because I was going to do the same. But I think that part of the problem is that black people have unintentionally internalized a lot of the precepts of capitalism. They've internalized the idea that it's fine for the success of some to come at the expense of others, that it's fine for that redistribution process to go to a quote unquote smart person who quote unquote made all the right decisions. And in so doing, we are, you know, by uncritically repeating the tenets of capitalism, we are actually repeating the tenets of our own impoverishment due to capitalist mechanisms. Another article came out. I think it was the New York Times. I wish I could remember who wrote it, but the New York Times is currently doing what they call the 1619 Project, which was started by Nicole Hannah-Jones, who I've talked about in the past. She does reporting on school segregation, and the 1619 Project is a collection. They made the entirety of the New York Times Magazine about the conditions of slavery at the time, how slavery has politically functioned, what the cascading effects of slavery has been. And one of the things that's identified in one of the articles is that antebellum slavery, the South slavery, one of its main inventions was that it introduced capitalism to America while also building pretty much the entirety of America's wealth. The highest concentration of millionaires per capita it wasn't in New York, it was in Mississippi. Right. It was in Mississippi. Yeah. It was in the Mississippi Delta, where white plantation owners made up the highest proportion of millionaires per capita in the United States. But the other part of that is that they didn't make that money just by telling slaves to pick cotton. They actually used torture, and they used a modern accounting mechanism. Things like how you report to your boss, how you get quotas, how you raise quotas, how you measure dips and falls, how you get loans and stuff like that. All of that didn't appear by itself. All of that actually, all of that actually appeared as a byproduct of accounting practices that were developed, very modern accounting practices that were developed during slavery by slave owners. And one striking statistic that was shown was that they were actually able to increase the amount of cotton a slave picked by something ridiculous like 200% over the course of half a century, simply by using torture. Apparently, they made it increase 2% every year. They made their yields increase 2% every year through these mechanisms. And when we're talking about capitalism, we're not talking about making money. We're actually talking about means of labor exploitation. Right. We're talking about means, and not just labor exploitation, but your boss, your corporation, your CEO is benefiting from your labor and making those profits they make. It's not because they work harder. It's because they're actually taking those profits from you and from your pocketbook. So when we're celebrating millionaires and billionaires, what we're actually celebrating is a process whereby we ourselves lose the kind of agency that's suggested by capital and suggested by better money, and that's a problem. And that's actually part of what this speaks to is that when we put black entrepreneurs and black billionaires on a high pedestal, we're not only doing it without political obligations, we're also doing it in a way where their money is expected to come back to us in a relatively unaccountable way. The actually ideal thing isn't for Jay-Z to invest back into Brooklyn. It's actually for him to be taxed until he's not a billionaire.
You know what? I hear you. He provides something. Either you buy it or you don't. I hear you. I hear you. But let me explain something to you. We've talked about this at length before. White people work in this system, and a lot of these covert programs were privately funded, and it still are, right? They still
the best
are.
ones are actually public funded, but the best, most sustainable ones. If you think about the things like the Homestead Act, things like the GI Bill, things like the New Deal.
But those weren't for us, Antoine. I'm talking about things that work against that work against us.
That's actually the most durable mechanism of racial oppression and the racial wealth gap is state programs. Things like even if we go back to incarceration, if we go back to the mass incarceration, that's something that's still provided by the state, funded by the state. So even
it's been privatized.
It's
being fed by the state, but it's being privatized.
It's slowly, but it's largely the federal government. It's largely the federal and state governments that are responsible for mass incarceration. So.
Yeah,
But again, our solution to billionaires, we shouldn't be expecting charity from billionaires because again,
I'm not expecting charity.
No, I'm not saying you were.
If you're from,
I'm talking in general.
Because again, why don't? Oh my God.
Okay. We should not be expecting charity from billionaires. What we should be expecting, we should be understanding that wealth is a byproduct of labor theft. It's a byproduct of unequal wealth concentration, and we should be seeking mechanisms that actually make it accountable. A society with billionaires is not a society where billionaires can be held accountable. We've learned that with the financial recession. We're going to learn that again. We've learned that with Trump. We've seen what nepotism and what wealth concentration produces. We've seen that very clearly. So the obvious response isn't that billionaires and millionaires should be more charitable. It's that the state, which is supposed to be democratic, that we should be using democratic mechanisms to assure that wealth concentration can't take place. Again, we should not be expecting Jay-Z's conscience to give him $1 billion. His class interests are actually defined by making sure that he can concentrate that money further and invest it further. Because the first thing that most billionaires and billionaires are going to do, they're not going to invest in their communities. They're going to put it in the Cayman Islands. They're going to put it in Panama. They're going to do things. They're going to put it in tax havens. They're going to do things that write it off. The best thing that we can do is we can tax them. We can tax them until to a point where they could be comfortable if they want to. But there's absolutely no reason why we should oblige allowing billionaires and millionaires to exist. No reason.
And that's the same argument that they make on the other end of the scale.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about specifically? I hear you, Antoine, and I feel if someone provides a service, again, I don't buy Jay-Z stuff, so he didn't make his money off of me. Some of these other ones, I don't buy Trump stuff either. He don't want me in his business. That's fine.
I don't have to. Rich though, they don't have to make money off of a product anymore. Once you get to a certain wealth threshold, your money can make money for you.
And these are the same people that are building. We talked about this as well. They build institutions for their own people. Once you go to a certain exclusive things,
which is afforded by wealth concentrations that we shouldn't allow. So that's going right back to what I was saying before. Allowing wealth concentrations allows power concentrations, which allows oppression, which allows theft.
The system was set up like that.
Yeah, it is set up. So we don't have to actually follow along with it or agree with it, though. We should call it for what it is, and then base our opposition on that point.
So, how do you oppose it?
What do you mean? Again, this is something.
I'm not being funny.
I agree. That's a perfectly fine question. Right now, everything that I'm saying is in active political contention at all times. Everything from the fall of the Glass-Steagall Act to to the credit card regulation that people like Joe Biden helped write, to the deregulation of banks. All of this is consistently under discussion and under debate at the highest levels of federal government. Your Senate elections, your state representative elections, your congressional representative elections all relate to these questions. Right. And if you look at their voting records, you will actually see that people like Martha Roby, who's retiring, who's the congressional delegate for our district, she has voted consistently for things like the Trump tax cuts, which actually allowed billionaires to maintain that wealth level. So we should be supporting both politicians and political causes that note that our current distribution of wealth is inherently unfair, unequal, and it allows further inequality. And we should be supporting people and supporting political causes like we're doing right here today that actually cause for that wealth to be disrupted. Now, there are a number of ways to do that. You can break up corporations after they reach a certain threshold in terms of their wealth attainment. You can add taxes. Now, I would actually agree to 100% tax after a certain threshold, but certain candidates are asking for taxes after you make like $5 million or something like that. Every $1 million after that, you get 2 cents tax. That's an Elizabeth Warren proposal.
Say what?
2 cents. Yeah, 2 cents. 2 cents. That's actually a major tax increase, though. 2 cents extra. That's a major tax increase that can be used to fund almost all of the things that we talk about, that we support, like better healthcare, like universal healthcare, things like that. So again, right now the fundamental problems of society are issues of redistribution. So our political goals should be at least in part oriented about making sure that the distribution comes back. These wealth disparities that we're seeing now, they're not legacy wealth disparities. These are actually relatively new. It started with the deregulation that happened started in the 70s, but it ended up going all the way out the 90s. And from the 70s to the 90s, all the things that stopped banks from merging, stopped banks from concentrating capital, that stopped predatory lending practices and things like that, which rich people used to make their money off of you, viewers and listeners. All of that is stuff that we can thwart through politics, through understanding redistributional politics, and through seeing the presence of astronomical wealth as instead of something to aspire to, as a form of, we should start seeing it as a form of theft, and we should be seeing. And our government, our supposedly democratic government, should see it as their responsibility to make sure that theft doesn't take place.
We've got time for a break.